Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
So-called Department of Government Efficiency that really is the Department of Government Efficiency for Elon Musk, not for you.
War on waste. At the DOGE Oversight Subcommittee hearing, we heard some strong stances from the very start. More scrutiny on the temporary agency is to be expected. And joining us now is Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee, who was there at the subcommittee meeting this past week. Representative, always good to see you. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you, Natasha. It's a pleasure being here with you, ma'am.
Subcommittee Chairwoman Marjorie Taylor Greene vowing to fight the war on waste. What did you take away from the DOGE Oversight Subcommittee meeting this past week?
Well, I thought it was very informative. We had the Democrats, of course, spent all their time attacking President Trump and Elon Musk, and the Republicans, I felt like we asked legitimate questions about the waste, abuse, and overspending of our government. $36 trillion in debt. You can't get past that. And, you know, we're getting a lot of complaints from federal employees that are saying that they have to show back up for work, that they still haven't been going back since COVID, things like that. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I think the name calling and everything else will continue, because the Democrats are chasing their tail right now. You know, this DOGE thing, it's uncovering a whole lot more than that. It's billions and billions of dollars that we're sending to terrorist organizations, and you got to wonder if some of this money, if it's not flowing right back into the back pockets of some politicians in Washington. And I think that's why the #1 search this week on the Washington area computers was criminal defense attorneys.
Tell me more about something you just mentioned. Which terrorist organizations and what monies have we been sending to them?
Well, actually, I have a bill to stop it. The Taliban gets $40 million a week that we know of through aid. And Congressman Perry actually brought forth some more, where we think it's in the billions of dollars to some of these terrorist organizations. And it's and the money's not really being laundered that well. The bills that I have deal with, we're sending money, so-called aid, but as you know, money is very fungible. It flows into their bank accounts, and then they are forced to turn over a cut off the top. You know, the Lord just takes 10% out of the top with tithe. Mob takes a good chunk when they do it, but the Taliban, they just get theirs right off the top, right out of the bank. So, and we couldn't even get Chuck Schumer and the Democrats last go around when he was in charge. We couldn't even get them to bring the bill up. It passed unanimous in the House. So there's a podcaster named Sean Ryan out of Nashville area. He's a former Navy SEAL, CIA operative, and he brought that to my attention through another fella named who's goes by the name of Legend. He can't go have his full name because of obviously Taliban would like to kill him. And as my conversation last week with former president over there told me, that there's over 100 Taliban members in our country right now that have come in illegally. So we've got to really be careful.
Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to News Nation. What's right is right. Everybody wants to see less waste, fraud, and abuse in government. We hear it from every politician asking for power. They just don't deliver. And it should be easy. Estimates of what they call in politics WFA, that's how common it is. It has its own acronym, waste, fraud, and abuse. The estimates are wild. Reports say anywhere from $100 to $500 billion. Another estimate says 5% of all global funding by the federal government is wasted. The OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, just reported that in 2022, the government spent $247 billion in improper payments. What does that mean? Payments made in error, duplicate, or without proper basis. The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, which both sides rely on for government research, has a high alert list of programs and areas that need to be checked. The Department of Defense, Medicare, the prison system, food safety, cybersecurity, they're all there. Major concerns of mismanagement and waste, fraud, and abuse. But I have suspicions about what we're seeing here early on, and increasingly, they are justified. Now, that list I just told you, the high alert list that the GAO does. Do you know what's not on that priority list? USAID. Why? Well, one, it's relatively small. It's less than 1% of the federal budget. And by the way, its share of the budget has shrunk since Reagan, so it's not like it's rapidly growing. I'm not saying there isn't waste there, and the more you find, the better. I'm on board. And it's got a $44 billion budget, but that's nothing compared to the people on this list. Health and Human Services, $2.4 trillion. Department of Defense, $1.3 trillion. This is in 1 year. AID is not even in the top 10. It's not even close. And guess what? We spend more on federal prisons than we do on foreign aid every year. Think about that. On federal prisons, more than on foreign aid. Think about it. So, again, I can't think of a reason to be against efficiency efforts, but why start with USAID? And I think the answer is about who's looking, and that's Elon Musk. Now, the first reason is, from what I can glean, is it's low fruit. It's easy. USAID isn't attached to a big dog like Lockheed Martin or AT&T or Microsoft, all of whom feed at the government trough way more than USAID. And those companies have had real issues with hacking and cost overruns, which I'll tell you in a second. And then I got suspicious because this MAGA Pod Bros story that broke, of course, on Twitter, falsely claiming that USAID was funding Politico and other outlets with these huge amounts. They never break things that are correct, and sure enough, it wasn't correct. USAID wasn't feeding them in these huge amounts as suggested. So why did they get fed this story, and by whom? Again, I think it points to Elon Musk. And so then we started doing more reporting, and guess what comes out? Did you know that Elon Musk is one of the entities benefiting from USAID? Thousands of Starlink terminals from Musk's satellite internet company provided to Ukraine. We all know the story, right? Didn't you think he gave them all? Turns out he didn't. But it did give access to Musk's advanced internet system to people who needed it. Now, the problem with that promise is he said only Ukraine would have access, not Russia. But now there's evidence and allegations that Russians did have access. They're military. So what did USAID do? They opened an investigation into Elon Musk this past September. You didn't know that, did you? USAID paid Politico only $40 grand in U.S. subscriptions in 2023, 2024. You want to end them, fine. The whole entire federal government paid Politico $8 million for subscriptions in 2024. And by the way, a lot of Republicans were on their list of subscribers. But again, you want to get rid of it, fine. Guess how much Musk got from USAID after saying he was donating the terminals? He didn't donate all of them. USAID had to buy over 1,300 of them at $1,500 a piece. And the weird thing is, the terminals retail for $600. Musk made over $2 million in that deal from USAID. Why didn't he donate all of them? Why wasn't it disclosed that he's being investigated in connection with that? And how can it not have something to do with why he picked them first? Shouldn't he have to at least explain if it's a personal beef or something he learned about the agency while dealing with them? If you're not going to go after the big dogs, you're going to go after low fruit that's a fraction of the problem, and you have this problem with them and an obvious conflict of interest? This is why I say Musk should have been vetted. Not because I love process, I love bureaucracy. No, but because you want to make sure you have the right person doing the job. Because why aren't you going after the real alligators in the swamp? It was just announced by a watchdog group that the Department of Defense is going to now pay Lockheed Martin $2 trillion for the F-35 Lightning II program, the fighter jet. It was supposed to be $200 billion in the early 2000s. Talk about waste and abuse. Why so much? Why do we need it that much? This watchdog group cited the government's inability to control costs as the reason. So why don't you start there? Last year, the DHS awarded AT&T a $150 million contract for 5G services. But guess what? They get the contract, and then all of a sudden we learn the story that all of their customers' data was stolen in a hack in 2022, including dozens of federal agencies. Why don't you look into that contract? The DOD spends hundreds of millions in IT services for Microsoft. They've been plagued by high-profile hacks by China and Russia on their federal government computer network. Why don't you look into that? Give it to somebody else. They're getting hacked. They're losing our information. They're getting billions and trillions. So I like the mission, but I have questions. You remember that OMB memo that Trump issued that paused trillions in federal grants and financial assistance? And it had to be rescinded? A recent report found that nonprofits and healthcare providers are struggling to maintain their operations because of these freezes. And they help real people who need real help. People with disabilities, the Head Start programs, youth care in hospitals. I know. I'm not saying that Trump means to punish these people. I'm sure he doesn't want these things to happen. But it is what happens when you go too fast and you cut too much with someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Musk is a genius. He does amazing things. I had a Tesla. I get SpaceX. I think it's amazing. Starlink is amazing. What they're doing with healthcare is amazing. But who says he's got this way of doing efficiency? We don't know that. And we don't know much about him and his relationships with the government. And it's a mistake. He's got this anonymous group of minions, one of whom was just exposed as having access to our Treasury Department data while also being a fan of eugenics and other racist tropes. Who else is he connected to? Look, it's got to be about results and demanding action. I say it here every night. Talk is easy. You got to walk the walk the right way. And I'm going to keep paying attention for you because this is starting off in a way that may be well-intentioned, but it's getting increasingly suspicious. This should be called the fishback discount. That's the guy who came up with it. It came from James Fishback, an investor who's one of the advisors to DOGE. And he said, you know what we should do? When we save all this money, we should give some of it back to the American family. Let's do 20%. We hit our $2 trillion target. That'll be $5 grand each. Sounds great. Musk said, I'll take it to president. So with the president, he loves the idea. Remember during the pandemic, he wanted to sign everybody's check. It wasn't even his money. It won't be this time either. But what a great idea. Can they do it? Should they do it? Let's bring in the man who deserves the credit for the idea, James Fishback. There he is. Could you have ever imagined when you first suggested this idea that you would be here with me discussing why President Trump is saying that this is now definitely going to happen?
Well, Chris, good evening. It is a humbling and honoring day to have the president's endorsement on this idea. I'm appreciative of the credit, but I got to tell you the truth. The credit goes to President Trump. DOGE, this savings would not be possible without his leadership. We put it to paper, but President Trump is going to be the one to execute it, and he deserves the credit for it.
So, James, Bill O'Reilly doesn't want the check. I want the check. I'll take his check, too. I don't know how it works. But here's the thing. As you know, right, you're an investor, and you know when you sit at the table, people want you to underpromise and overdeliver, okay? The idea, why? Because then they're happy with the surprise. Here, isn't there a concern that setting that target of $2 trillion is way too high, and that people think they're going to get $5 grand, but now if you don't get the $2 trillion, they don't get the $5 grand?
Well, it's interesting, Chris. I don't think it's actually too high. I think it's totally reasonable. But here's the thing. The DOGE dividend check that President Trump endorsed today, that is going to help us get the $2 trillion, and here's why. We're going to incentivize everyday Americans, whether they're in East Palestine or in East Baltimore, to step up and say, there's waste, there's fraud, there's abuse in my community. Report it to DOGE. Why? Because the more money the DOGE saves, the bigger the DOGE dividend check is. Chris, look at how successful DOGE has been under Trump's leadership, with just Elon Musk and a dozen engineers eating Chick-fil-A and drinking Red Bull, sleeping in the office. Now imagine deputizing 100 million Americans to be the eyes and ears on the ground. When I was growing up, I took my grandfather, a World War II vet, to the VA for his checkups. And I got to tell you, I saw waste, I saw fraud, I saw abuse. I didn't have DOGE to report it to, and I didn't have an incentive to report it. That's not the case with the DOGE dividend. Every American can step up, report fraud and abuse to DOGE directly via X, and we'll see the savings go up, hit $2 trillion, and we'll see the checks dispersed next summer. And absolutely, President Trump's name and signature should be on it, because this would not have been possible without his leadership.
I like the idea, obviously, of finding waste, fraud, and abuse, and I like to see something, say something extension. As you know, there are lots of different places people can go to alert the government to what's going on. Whether or not they do anything about it is where you're promising that DOGE will be different. My other question is, isn't the point, though, what Musk brought up later in the day after the first flush of this idea, which is this has got to go towards the fiscal crisis that this country is in Everybody wants a check, of course. I'm not saying no check. But what matters more? Sending a check to people or lowering the deficit and trying to make a dent in the trillions and trillions that we owe in debt?
We can do both. We absolutely can do both, Chris. We're $37 trillion in debt, which is why our proposal calls for 80% of that going to pay down the debt and only 20% going directly to taxpayers. Let's not forget, this isn't a handout. This was taxpayers' money that was sent to D.C. in the first place. It wasn't sent to D.C. to then be quickly sent to Myanmar for a DEI musical or Colombia for a transgender opera. It was sent to D.C. to support Americans. And guess what? The American heartland is crumbling. Our roads and bridges are in despair, and veterans everywhere you look are being denied essential health care. And so the American people deserve compensation, deserve restitution. That's the first point. The second point is we need to restore the trust between taxpayer and her government. We can never balance the budget if the taxpayer feels cheated. And guess what? They do, given what DOGE has exposed in just the past month. Chris, we're 1 month into DOGE, and under Trump's leadership, we've already saved $55 billion. Let's let this experiment run for another year and a half, get to $2 trillion, and send every American a check for $5,000 saying, we are back, the government is accountable, respectful, and honest again. That is what the golden age is all about.
And yet there is not a single wire transfer. There's not a single check. Elon Musk says,
but
there's...
you
can't...
In 3 weeks, you're not going to get that.
Okay, well, then don't say you've clawed
You
it
can
back.
ask for it, but you're not... Okay, then don't exaggerate. That means that every person on the Hill will have to have tape over his or her mouth.
Good thing.
'Cause that's all they do is hyperbola. Yeah, I'm with you on that. But it's unrealistic to think that anybody's going to, excuse me, redeposit money that's been foolishly spent or wasted. It's going to take a year. But what can happen is a disciplined approach to DOGE. I like DOGE. I want this. 80% of the American people are with me. The Trump haters don't want it. The entrenched people where you live in Washington, D.C. don't want it.
They're terrified.
And they're going to find any excuse. Research has stopped. No, it's not. That's not true. FAA people are being let go. That's not true. So the charges made against Musk, exaggerating, can't back it up, the same thing's happening on the hate Musk side. Exactly the same.
Well, to be fair, at least what Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, is saying is that, yes, 400 people were let go from the FAA. That's what he said. He said they're all probationary.
They were janitors.
We don't
air traffic controllers.
We don't. Well,
Come on.
No, he's said that, and that's fair. But I guess my point is when you go through the slash and burn route, and you have Elon Musk put up this number of Social Security numbers, and he put up this like Excel spreadsheet chart where it comes back.
Yes.
It's something about how the number comes back for death false or something, as if somehow that is proof that what he's doing is working. And I think you make a great point. He's arrogant. He's a great marketer. Let's get to the point. Yes, making government more efficient is good for America, unquestionably, and that's what the people voted for. How he's doing it, though, is it good for him or is it good for actually long-term success?
The Social Security thing is foolish. You're not going to win with that. There's just simply too much chaos. And as somebody pointed out, the formula they use is obsolete at Social Security. But in order to get into that entitlement, you are going to have to spend at least a year to dig in to find out who's cashing these fraudulent checks. This is very complicated. What is easier is to go into the Department of Education, and that'll be next, and find out all of this federal money that's gone into the school districts and has done no good at all, indoctrination money. But the overall point is this, that whatever Trump/Musk does is not going to be good for 30, 35% of the people. They're just going to say it's lousy. I'll give you the most vivid example I can give you. Here in New York, there's a big controversy about Mayor Adams selling out to Donald Trump because his charges were dropped. Everybody knows that, right?
Yeah,
and
we
the
covered it on
deal,
Friday.
which I don't believe, right, which wasn't the deal, is that Adams is going to cooperate with Homeland Security, Kristi Noem Homan, and put federal agents on Rikers Island so when these thugs are arrested, they go to Rikers, there the feds are right there to pick them up. The New York City Council does not want that at all. And the outcry is now saying, well, Adams has to resign. He has to quit, even though he's a Democrat, because he's cooperating with Trump. That's how bad this is. And the argument is, hey, Homan's not arresting just criminal aliens. He's sweeping up people with no criminal background, migrants. No, he's not. Those people who are being swept up are living with or in proximity to the violent aliens. And they deserve to be swept up. If you're in a house with a bank robber, you know he's robbing a bank. My point, Leland, and you should understand it, is that no matter what DOGE, Homeland Security does, 35% are going to oppose it and make up stuff to try to wreck it.
These things, like it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical. I think it's really just saying, let's look at each of the expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it.
DOGE saying they've uncovered billions in wasteful and dangerous spending across the federal government, and Elon Musk hoping to cut $2 trillion from the budget in the coming days. Since DOGE's launch, they are claiming some shocking findings, including the Iron Mountain mine, where federal employee retirements are processed by hand using paper and manila envelopes 230 feet underground. The EPA locating $20 billion in wasted tax dollars, which was supposedly hurried out the door before Inauguration Day. The Pentagon wasting thousands on coffee cups and soap dispensers. FEMA spending $59 million on luxury New York City hotels for undocumented migrants. NewsNation's Mills Hayes has the details. And Mills, all of these claims need some context here. So what are we learning about how much taxpayer dollars are being saved?
Hey, Natasha. Well, the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk, of course, says that they have saved taxpayers nearly $50 billion since President Trump signed an executive order creating the department on his first day in office. Musk promised transparency, and DOGE unveiled a new website. But as you can see, Americans are still waiting on some of the key details, still not posted on the DOGE website. Another alarming update from the Huffington Post reported a quick search of the DOGE website shows classified details from the National Reconnaissance Office, the federal agency that designs, builds, and maintains U.S. intelligence satellites. Musk's company, SpaceX, actually has a $1.8 billion contract with NRO to build hundreds of spy satellites. The White House, however, says that DOGE did not share classified information. Documents obtained by the Washington Post show step-by-step plans to carry out President Trump's plan to cut diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. DOGE has planned to trim staff from dozens of offices in the executive branch, including those that protect employees' civil rights and others that investigate complaints of employment discrimination in the federal workforce.
It's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country.
And after multiple losses and being blocked from servers at the Treasury Department, a judge granted DOGE a win, allowing the non-governmental agency to access records at the Department of Labor, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Natasha.
And Mills, how else is DOGE trying to get rid of fraud and waste in the federal budget? Do we know?
Well, DOGE said Friday that it had recovered $1.9 billion of missing money tied to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, that it says the Biden administration allegedly misplaced. And after President Trump signed an executive order giving Musk a mandate to fire non-essential federal workers. Thousands of federal employees were fired this week, like Nick Massey. He managed national forest land in North Carolina and says public national land is about to look a lot different in the coming months.
I would just ask anybody in a management or legislative position to just consider that you've just axed a really large, skilled part of your workforce.
And union officials say that the Trump administration fired 20 immigration judges without explanation on Friday. This as the president looks to cut the size of the federal government. However, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have expressed a need for more immigration officials since there is a backlog of 3.7 million cases. Natasha?
Wow. All right, our Mills Hayes with that. Thank you. And in less than an hour, be sure to stay tuned for the News Nation special report, Elon's America. We're going to be taking a deeper look at the man who is impacting so many aspects of our lives, from government to business to medicine and more. And his father is joining us live tonight. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central. Don't miss it.
15 minutes at the top of the hour, everybody. A live look at the U.S. Capitol building this morning. And the ball is now in Congress's court as President Trump officially creates DOGE. That's that new Department of Government Efficiency. The Elon Musk-led group being tasked to cut as much as $2 trillion in federal fat. But at least 3 lawsuits are already being filed challenging DOGE's creation. Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee, just joined the new House DOGE subcommittee. He joins me live this morning. Congressman, it's always good to have you. Thanks for hopping on with me.
Thanks for having me, ma'am, as always.
Let me just list off, this laundry list for starters. Just this fiscal year alone, the government spending more than $125 billion for Social Security, $103 billion for national defense, $85 billion for health costs, $80 billion for net interest alone, and $77 billion for Medicare. You took to Twitter this week and you said, we're going to come out blasting. Congressman, what's the first thing on the chopping block?
Well, I hope it's the Pentagon. It's very bloated. As you know, they've not passed 8 of the last audits that they had. Heck, they don't even complete the audits. They're very arrogant. They can't find over $500 billion. Man, that's a battleship that they cannot find. That's the first place to look. And, you've got them up here saying we're going to, the thing you got to worry about is when we find all these savings that they run around and spend it that day, because that's what they'll do with the Pentagon. It'll go into another black hole. So I think we need to alert the American public to that as well. Health care and Medicare, things like that, we got to look at the fraud in those things. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of duplication. Let's make sure the people that deserve the care get the care. And I think that's a good thing to start to. Another area we're going to look at is education. We talked about during the campaign of doing away with the Department of Education, sending that money to the states. When Jimmy Carter made the Department of Education a cabinet-level position, it was prior to that, it had been formed in the 1800s, I believe, but it was not a cabinet level. When he did that in, I think, 76 or 77, we were the best education system in the world. That was no debate. Now, after trillions of dollars, we're the 22nd.
Congressman, is that going to happen, the Department of Education? Is that going to be done away with?
It should. I don't know if we got the guts to do it. I have the guts to do it. We can pay our teachers more. And that's what the unions are supposed to be about, not about promoting bureaucrats. Man, there's not one bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that's taught a kid how to read, write, or do arithmetic at Bearden High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. I can guarantee you that. They take trillions of dollars. They're worse than the mob. Ma'am, the Lord just takes 10% with tithe. And the education system takes billions upon billions of dollars for the bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C. that have nothing to do with what's going on in the classroom. Why not let the locals do it? What are we afraid of? Our school boards and our state legislators controlling that money?
I know you're trying to get to the bottom of it, but, sir, you and I have talked about this at length over and over again. Government overspending is a tale as old as time. I know you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but by the time Trump's second term ends, will you have righted the ship, you think?
No, heck no. It's going to be a constant fight because people up here have no guts. They run on this. They go home to their districts, to their MAGA and Reagan Day dinners, and they'll focus on things like Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio. And out of the top 100, she's not even in the top 20. So I think, it's all a diversion. And then they come up here and they boat you down the river. But you know what we've got now? We've got people that are paying attention. You talked about X in your previous segment there with Elon Musk. Yeah. These young folks are paying attention. They know what we're doing, and I welcome that. I'm sick and tired of people that come up here they've got DOGE tattooed on their forehead. And where have they been the last 4 years? They've been spending your dadgum money, your great-grandchildren's money, ma'am.
Before I let you go, Congressman, what's the real scoop with Vivek Ramaswamy? I mean, I know you've got the scoop, Burchett. You don't get tapped by Trump to be at the helm of this department and then, you know, call it quits on day one. I know that you know. So what's the deal?
Ma'am, how many alpha males can you have in one fishbowl? That's a pretty small pool of water, and I welcome him into government because I think people like him need to step up. I have a huge Indian community there in Tennessee, and they're some of the hardest working. They believe in capitalism, they believe in our system, and they like me. So, I mean, it's a trifecta. So, and I like Vivek. He's a good dude.
It's like that old saying from the bank robbers. Why do I rob banks? Because that's where the money is. There's a whole lot more money being spent and probably wasted in the Department of Defense than USAID and all these other places that they've been looking at.
And let's get into that in some more detail. DOGE, as it continues to tear through these federal agencies, Elon Musk and company, look at what they've been going after here. The layoffs are underway, thousands of recent hires. The access to the IRS, which we were talking about a few minutes ago, reportedly getting ready to make cuts at the Pentagon. You know, you heard in the clip there, Chris Hahn was talking about. That's the big one right there. That's where a lot of the money is. So for Elon, he's in many ways bringing the same approach he brought to Twitter, right? When he took over that company, he came in really aggressively at Twitter and laid a lot of people off, right, at the beginning of that. But the important part, when you think about it from the government's point of view, I think this is true. I said earlier that two things can be true at once. Sometimes it's far more than two. So yes, they're doing some crazy stuff. Maybe they're doing some illegal stuff, but they're also finding some crazy stuff. Here's Elon earlier in the week.
All the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And I'm like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork.
So this is actually a real thing that he's talking about. It's crazy. I mean, a lot of his claims about government waste either kind of lack evidence or maybe sometimes they're just not accurate. This one is accurate. It's true. But this mine, so this is the post that DOGE put on social media about all of this. Retirement paperwork. So you talk about thousands of federal employees. It's really processed by hand, and it's really stored in this old limestone mine, 230 feet underground in Pennsylvania. The paper records, I mean, this is a perfect example, right, of the kind of waste that Musk says he's targeting. We go back, there's a report from 2014. They found from multiple administrations spending at least $100 million trying to automate the record system. Apparently they had little to show for it though, right? Since it's still done by hand in this mine. I mean, literally, they haven't been able to automate it after all this time. As for how much DOGE is saving the government with all this, that part's not really clear. We break it down here. There's not a ton of data out from them, but what we do know is that the parts of the budget they've targeted so far, employee payroll, foreign aid, that's a small share, right, compared to the overall. It's like 5% combined, whereas the big money is the Medicare and defense. So like if you combine those two right here, this is the combination of Medicare and defense. As we're saying, you go after defense, then all of a sudden you're talking about some real money. Elon Musk and DOGE.
And NewsNation's Mills Hayes has the very latest from DOGE tonight. Mills, do we know who may be on the chopping block this week?
Hey, Natasha, well, more than 10,000 federal government employees were fired this past week, some telling me that they don't feel like they're being treated as human. Thousands of federal government workers from the Departments of Interior, Energy, Veteran Affairs, Agriculture, and Health and Human Services opened their email inboxes this week to find they were fired.
It's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential.
DOGE head and billionaire Elon Musk has spearheaded the Trump administration's efforts to reduce the federal workforce.
I wouldn't say that I was shocked after seeing kind of the previous week what had happened at other agencies, but I was angry.
Chelsea Milburn joined the United States Navy in 2014. After a disability, she transitioned into a public affairs position at the Department of Education last November.
I would say that it's unfair for Elon Musk and others who have similar views to portray all civil servants as these corrupt lazy individuals is something that we hear all the time. 30% of us are veterans who have served our country.
Milburn spent most of her savings moving for her new job and now plans to file for unemployment. Republicans are rushing to Trump and Musk's defense.
We hate that anybody's losing their job, but at the same time, we know that the debt that we have in this country is not manageable, and it's becoming a national security risk.
It's as if we don't have $35 trillion in debt to some people. I mean, that's the reality. America spends too much money.
While President Trump has promised to drain the swamp, more than 85% of federal employees live outside of D.C.
I think it's going to be the first time a president has ever intentionally created unemployment. I mean, this is going to be devastating to families and communities.
Sources say the IRS will lay off thousands of probationary workers in the middle of tax season as early as next week. And on Friday, more than 300 workers from the National Nuclear Security Administration were fired. That is the agency that oversees the country's nuclear weapons stockpile. But then it got chaotic when later that day, the agency tried to unfire those employees, but then had trouble finding their contact info. Today, the Department of Energy says that less than 50 people were actually fired.
80 days into Trump's second term, and lately, all we have been hearing about, at least for the past 9 days or so, is tariffs. It almost makes you forget about DOGE. Remember back in the day when Elon Musk was slashing and burning his way through the federal government, press conferences inside the Oval Office? Today's cabinet meeting brought Elon Musk and his team back into the spotlight as he reported back just how much money they've saved the government, how much they've saved us taxpayers. Spoiler for you, those keeping score, Musk has now backpedaled on many of his initial promises.
Well, I think we can do at least $2 trillion. I think if we try for $2 trillion, we've got a good shot at getting one. I think we will have accomplished most of the work required to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion within that time frame.
So in that time frame, 130 days.
I'm excited to announce that we anticipate savings in FY26 from reduction of waste and fraud by $150 billion.
Okay, so for those of you who don't do math in your head, 15% of his updated $1 trillion goal, 7.5% of the original promise. Ned Ryan, American Majority founder, CEO, Christina Pascucci, former Democratic U.S. Senate candidate in the great state of California, with us now. Good to see both of you.
Me too.
Good to be with you, Leland.
Ned, start with you. The fact that we don't hear about DOGE every day and celebrated by the administration, does that tell us that the slashing and burning did not go over as well with the American people as Trump thought it would?
I don't know if it's that. I think that probably what's taking place, and again, when people want to look at DOGE, has it been a success or not? I mean, we're literally, 11 weeks into this project. I think they're making strides and steps in the right direction. I think what they're doing is settling in. Actually, I know for a fact that they're starting to work more closely with the GAO and OMB. So I'm actually quite optimistic that, sure, I mean, the fact of the matter is, having been in D.C. for 25 years, this wasn't going to be done in 130 days. It's not going to be done in a year and a half. They're going up against probably 100 years worth of damage. And so I think reality's kind of setting in. This is going to be much more of a long haul. But, I mean, they've already got 216,000 fewer federal employees through DOGE. And moving in the right direction. So I think it's off to a great start, but there's a lot of room to grow.
Christina, two ways to look at this. One is, hey, you guys only got 15%. The flip side is that's a lot better than 0%. One thing that's also stopped is the Democratic outrage about DOGE. Is that because Democrats learned defending government workers, government waste was not a winning proposition?
Has the outrage stopped? I don't know. Well, it's really good to be with you, first off. Thank you for having me, Leland. And I actually don't think it's stopped to the extent that it needs to. I would love to see, as a Democrat and someone who ran as an independent Democrat for office, I would love to see Democrats focus instead on focusing on Elon Musk, focusing on getting rid of that waste, fraud, and abuse, and bringing great ideas to the table. There are so many Americans right now that are desperate, that are so hungry for a political change. They feel politically homeless. And me being one of them. I mean, you talk to people on both sides of the aisle. And so I think what Democratic voters really want to see right now is more action and, no more faux outrage. And what Elon did had to be done. I don't necessarily agree with all the ways in which he did it. But when you look at the root cause of how we got here, it was the inaction of both political parties for so many years. Democrats being in the lead for the majority of those years more recently when they didn't take action. And so this is a result of that. And I think the best thing we can do right now is put our work where our mouth is.
Or be honest about it. Look, drunken spending was a bipartisan issue here in Washington.
Yes.
By bipartisan, I mean they both agreed on it. So, Ned, this goes to you, and I think Christina rightly identifies something. That the flip side of what she says is that if Trump's for it, Democrats have to be against it. What is Republicans and Democrats, what is Republicans and Donald Trump's plan when Democrats finally figure out, and some will because Christina's already there is a lot of Americans who are hungry for Donald Trump's ideas, but not the chaos that comes with Donald Trump?
Well, they are. I mean, they realize there's something very wrong with the system, Leland, that, we find out what kind of system sends out $250 million to 28,000 toddlers. Well, it's a system that's broken, and I'm referring to the unemployment insurance benefits that were sent out over the last 5 years. I mean, people know this system is broken. They know the system's not working on behalf of the American people. And sure, when you're moving fast and breaking things, there appears to be a little bit of chaos. But the American people are looking at this going, well, at least someone's trying to do something to fix a system that's broken, and I would argue for decades has not been serving the American people.
Christina, where does this go from here for Democrats? Because you sort of rightfully point out that there are a lot of things that Donald Trump does that the middle, and I think the middle is a quite vocal middle, once done, they may not like how Donald Trump is doing it. Have you seen any Democrats other than yourself, thinking nationally prominent Democrats, who are picking up on that?
Some people talk about it, but then, I mean, you see them focusing their time on press conferences and creating new bills to counteract what President Trump's doing instead of focusing on creating new bills to bring their ideas to the table and really address the needs of the American people. And so I'd really like to see more of that. And you just touched on something that I want to bring up is, on the Republican side, they will criticize Democrats when they try to go too hard on something. One example in California that was infamous was when they said by 2035, every single car has to be electric, and then our electrical grid went down. I'm all for caring for the environment. You have to do it incrementally in a common sense way. And so when you're bringing a chainsaw to the government and you have innocent people who have dedicated their whole lives to government in the crossfires, you have to take a step back and say, okay, let's move fast, but maybe not quite as fast, because there is a need to cut this waste, fraud, and abuse, but we're going to undermine our own movement if we do it carelessly, as has been done a little bit in the last few months.
One of the reasons, Ned, people watch this program is because we look into the future and oftentimes have been pretty good at telling people what's coming down the pike. And something that's going to be coming down the pike is there is going to be some huge issue, plane crash, pandemic outbreak, some kind of legal issue, some kind of law enforcement issue, whatever it is, and or food safety issue, and it is going to be in an area of government oversight that was cut by DOGE. RFK Jr. on CBS this morning didn't even know what was cut in his own department. Take a listen.
You propose more than $11 billion in cuts to local and state programs addressing things like infectious disease, mental health, addiction, and childhood vaccination. Did you personally approve those cuts?
I'm not familiar with those cuts.
About $750,000 of a University of Michigan grant into adolescent diabetes was cut. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, and that's something that we'll look at.
That's not going to work out well, Ned.
It's got to be better integrated into the various departments and agencies. First of all, I think DOGE is one of the most important reform movements we've seen in decades. Probably the most important reform movement we've seen since Bill Clinton and Al Gore cut over 400,000 federal employees. but it's got to be integrated better into these departments and agencies. The premise is absolutely correct. The system is broken. Got to be integrated better so you don't catch people by surprise, but say, hey, we're going to be on the same page, working together on making the right cuts.
All right, Ned, Christina, thank you both very much. We appreciate it.